drive them. Essentially, the Texans always succeed at pushing them away. Tell them, General Lee, that I shall witness their conduct today. Then General Gregg turns to the Texas regiment and he says, attention, Texas Brigade, or something along those lines. Forward march, the eyes of General Lee are upon you. So to me, that was electric. I had no idea. Suddenly there it is, primary source documents, the earliest one being a letter from 1864. This event happens on 1864 on a particular day. I'm trying to remember now, maybe it's May 6th. But there's a letter from 1 or 2 weeks, several days later, in which this soldier writes to a woman that he was friendly with, not a girlfriend or partner, but he had a friendship with a woman. And he would write these very long letters. I mean, back then people didn't have anything to kill the time. So, people would write really long, detailed letters about what happened step by step. And this letter is published in the 1890s for the first time, and then again in a book. And this is uncontested, meaning historians of the Civil War have known about these letters for a long time. They accept them as being valid, true primary source documents. But neither historians of the Civil War nor historians of the Eyes of Texas had pointed out that indeed the phrase "the eyes of Texas are upon you" is an echo of words by and about General Robert E. Lee. Moreover, not as a university president in 1865 or 1870, but as commander of the armies of the South in Northern Virginia, instructing the men of Texas to charge against the Yankees. So it turns, so I can tell with complete certainty, the words "the eyes of Texas are upon you" originate from wartime words of General Robert E. Lee and General Gregg, as General Lee and General Gregg gave the instructions to the Texas Brigade to fight against the Yankees. And they won that battle. The Texas soldiers were inspired by the presence of General Lee. They pulled him back so that he himself wouldn't die in the conflict. And they won that battle, even though they didn't win the war. So this means once our song, created in 1903, becomes UT's fight song, it means that our UT fight song is derived from the fighting wartime words of Civil War General Robert E. Lee. So, so here we go. Here he is. He was beloved and admired, and a deeply inspiring figure to the people of the South, and especially to the soldiers that served with him. He became a university president after the South lost the Civil War. And as I mentioned, he dies in 1870. And UT's third president happens to be one of the people that is at that funeral as a guest of honor. Now, when Prather becomes UT's president by 1899, first interim president, and becomes a full-fledged president in 1900, he begins using this phrase, which he takes as this inspirational, uplifting thing about the South and about this heritage, these kind of fighting or marching words of General Lee. It becomes a joke to the students. The students don't take it very seriously. The students think this is absurd. The eyes of Texas are upon you. The eyes of Texas are upon you. Whenever there's some issue, some controversy, or some speech, this guy says the eyes of Texas are upon you. So to them, it becomes a bit of a joke. Like, no matter where you go, the eyes of Texas are watching you. So the athletics director of our university, a guy called Frank Homer Curtis, decides that one fun thing that our university could do, which is done in many other universities, again, this guy's an adult, he's a faculty member. The athletics director decides that UT should have fundraisers, especially for the athletics department. So he decides that what they should do is a minstrel show. And carry this thing out, maybe in the university or maybe outside. So they start announcing that UT will finally have their first minstrel show in 1903. And this guy here, Lewis Johnson, was one of the students. He's an older student. I think he's about 27 years old at this time. He was studying law, and he was also a sort of teaching assistant for the history department where I work now. And he was a bit of an organizer. He was involved in many things, from the Daily Texan to the Glee Club. And Lewis Johnson took it upon himself to prod several people to contribute. And he tasked this other guy, John Lang Sinclair, who was a rather poetic guy from a town next to San Antonio, who had been distinguished by our university as being our poet laureate. So Johnson says that he needs a song for this show. Now, Sinclair tells us that time went by and he didn't have anything. He didn't have a song, he didn't have anything. So suddenly the night before the show, there's this last minute pressure, which is Lewis Johnson and apparently other members of the Glee Club. They come to John at the dorm where he lived, Brackenridge Hall, so-called B Hall, and they besiege him. In some sense, they lock him up. One account says that they lock him up in a closet, and it's the song or else. You gotta give us the song. We need it for tomorrow. According to some of these accounts, Johnson had already chosen that the song should be based on President Prather's phrase, "The eyes of Texas are upon you," which makes sense because, in fact, that day when they're about to sing, last night of the day before they print the song, that's already advertised. Like, the song is coming the day before in the newspaper. So the other concept that they had is, can we do it based on the song "I've Been Working on the Railroad"? I've been working on the railroad. The eyes of Texas are upon you has nearly the same metric length. We just have to cut the word "the." So it's I've been working on the railroad. The eyes of Texas are upon you. These two things fit. You can make one song based on this railroad song. Apparently, the orders are, you've got to get this done before dawn. Again, this story didn't show up in the report. It would have been nice to see it there. It doesn't show up, but it comes from the sum of several primary sources. John writes a song. Lewis and another guy who was there, Thomas Charlton Hall, are not satisfied. They think what John has done is too poetic. It's a song about the bright blue eyes of Texas and about how these bright blue eyes of Texas are accompanying you through the night and during the day, and the stars of many colors. It's just not funny. They needed something funny for the show, something that would actually, somehow crack people up. So they do a second version that same night, and then they perform it for the first day on, I think it's March 12, 1903. Is that when it is? Or let me think. I haven't looked at the date in a little bit. Let me just think for a moment. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We can check we can check later whether it's March or May. I'm spacing out for a moment. But what matters is that they sing this song, and now I wanted to know who exactly sang it, and was it sung in blackface? So UT's report had told us, well, maybe it was these four individuals who show up in some lists of who is the varsity string quartet. I mean, the varsity quartet of singers. And the other possibility is maybe it's these other four guys who show up in this newspaper review. So then, cross-analyzing multiple sources, I was able to pinpoint who exactly were the four guys. It was a similar mixture of those two groups, but not exactly either one of those two stories. But the four men that sang it were accompanied by a group of other performers, including John Lang Sinclair, who stood in this semicircle. And then part of the mystery is this group of people, have they painted their face black to actually perform this song? John Lang Sinclair himself admitted as much when people asked him many years later. He said that he may have been painted black and that he looked grotesque. And someone said that his clothing looked like the clothing of a Negro. Your clothing looked Negro-esque. And then he wrote that his feelings were hurt, that somebody said his clothing looked Negro-esque because it was just his own clothing. Now, there are these other performers there. And one of these other performers writes a letter to a newspaper many years later in which he says that in the background, what they had set up was a series of guys in blackface pretending to be workers working on a railroad. And here, to me, this, in addition to what John Sinclair said and Professor Robert Edgar Law and other sources, convinced me these people are singing in blackface. So here we have a song that is created for a minstrel show. A minstrel show is an event in which white people paint their faces black back then to make fun of black people. They made money by making fun of black people. They ridiculed the way black people look. They ridiculed the way black people talk. They made fun of the ways black people moved or sang, and also the certain characters, certain stock characters that had certain names. And at the same time, they did it with a certain amount of artistry, meaning it wasn't all cruel. They felt sympathy for some of these characters. There was some sort of a nostalgia or a condescending sympathy that they felt for these men and women who were black. But at the same time, this is what it was. In this image, we see boxes, cages where mostly black men were kept when they served in convict leases after the end of the Civil War. What I mean is that the Civil War ends, and what came to the South for countless black people was in many cases not good at all. All kinds of horrible, awful things continued without the official system of slavery. And this was one of them. What happened basically is that laws were set up so that police officers could arrest black men or homeless men without evidence and simply stop you on the street and say, do you have a job? No. What are you doing here? I'm walking. Where are you going? I'm walking to try to get a job, but you don't have a job, right? Okay, then you're a vagrant. You're a vagrant. Vagrancy is a crime. You're now arrested. You're under arrest. So now they could take a black person, and they did countless thousands of times. They took these black people off of the street. You could be sitting somewhere. You could be even just walking, and you would get arrested. You were on the wrong side of the sidewalk, or you looked someone wrong, or suddenly you're arrested. You go to a judge. The judge finds you guilty. You're now incarcerated. Now you are, in a sense, a property of the state of Texas. And now the state of Texas, for example, would lease these convicts to plantation owners who had sugar plantations, cotton plantations, who were building railroads. And these convicts would be forced to work in brutal conditions all the livelong day. So from the crack of dawn, from 5 a.m. until it was so dark that people could no longer see, these men were working under the most brutal conditions. And I'll say about that in a moment. What I mean is the following. During slavery, a slave master has certain limitations on what they could do to someone because the slave is their property. You are their property. So if they hurt you too much, if they injure you, if they disable you, or if you fall sick, they're losing money because you're not working. If a master were to shoot you or kill you because they abuse you too much or because they got too angry, they lose money because you are their property. So in some sense, the system of slavery enabled some of these masters to have certain restraints in the way they treated their Black slaves. Once slavery ended, those restraints totally ended as well. So now when you were a rich farmer and you rented these convicts in the system known as convict leasing, what happened was you could abuse them as much as you want. You could whip them all day long. You could flog them. You could shoot them. You could do anything to these people. And if they died, then you would just rent a new one. So in other words, these convict lease became an incentive for a greater type of abuse than was common during slavery. And in the state of Texas, this was finally revealed by the enterprising investigative skills of a reporter by the last name of Briggs, who worked in the Austin City branch of the San Antonio Express newspaper. And he went to several of these plantations and work camps, railroad camps, etc., to see what were the conditions in which these men were working. Now, he says 60 to 70% of them were Black. Many were Mexicans, some very few were white, but these men were being exploited, these men were being abused, and the horrors that he described in these newspaper articles were so devastatingly disturbing that sessions of the legislature in Austin, Texas suddenly took place to analyze whether this could possibly be true. So the Texas legislature set up a committee to investigate how much of this was true. And people were worried. The newspapers then say, we're worried that the committee might whitewash the facts, because now they're going to go to the places. What are they going to say? Oh, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. You know, these convicts are being treated with love. They went to multiple of these work camps. They reported their findings. Many people testified, and they confirmed that what Briggs had written about was true. Black men, above all, were being brutally tortured, abused, exploited, and killed, ruthlessly, brutally killed. The degree to which these men were murdered during their work hours led some of these commentators to say, I am convinced that every nail, every slab of wood on the railway is covered with the blood of these men, and talk about how the bodies would be buried next to these roads and railways. It's horrifying stuff. I read this horrifying stuff. I didn't write about it in my first paper, but I've written a second paper in which I discuss some of it. This horrifying system of forced labor is, without a doubt, without any interpretation, that is what the song I've Been Working on the Railroad is about. It's a romanticization, a melancholy romanticization of this convict leasing system in which thousands of Black men were brutalized and abused and died, even in the state of Texas. When this was published, when this came out, there was a hearing in the legislature, 1910, the state of Texas, analyzing the evidence, they officially concluded, among one of their official conclusions, that the convict leasing system of Texas was equal to any of the worst systems of punishment and torture in the entire planet. And when they discovered that, they prohibited it. It ended. Finally, this was prohibited. So we go back to the song in 1903, the topic that the UT white college students chose to make fun of and have great fun enjoying was not just the Confederate inspired saying of President Prather, but it was also, I've been working on the railroad all the livelong day. The eyes of Texas are upon you. you cannot get away. Try as you may, to escape them. You cannot get away. So to me, this was a discovery. Like, here it is, the convict leasing system, the railroad, all wrapped up in this minstrel blackface performance in 1903. Let me try to speed things up here. This is what these kind of events look like. This particular photograph is from 1911. It is from UT's yearbook, which is the UT Cactus yearbook from 1911. The guy who's sitting down is by the last name of Toombs, Alf Toombs, and the guy standing up, it's a man, it's Eugene Harris. And they used to do these skits as the Toom and Harris stock company, and they would put on the blackface and act out these stereotypes, and everybody would laugh. Now, that's all racist and awful, but one of the things that I was curious about, that again, I wouldn't have to do this research if I had just seen it in UT's report or in any of the many, many articles that have been written about this, was to what extent did this fraternal sibling of the minstrel show, the UT minstrel show, is born with a fraternal twin, which is the Eyes of Texas. To what extent does the Eyes of Texas continue in the following years and decades being sung in these minstrel shows? So I looked that up and I found that it did continue. Here is an example from the newspaper that back then was known as the Austin Statesman. This particular review is from 1919, and it says Varsity Minstrels, that's UT's minstrel show, which was not just a student group. This is a faculty sponsored group that that was used for things like fundraising, and then involved faculty in numerous positions. For example, the director of the band, the director of athletics, professors would sometimes appear with their faces painted black. All the way into the 1950s and 60s, UT faculty was sponsoring this offensive stuff. University talent gives clever show of minstrelsy, vaudeville. It says the Majestic Orchestra gave a minstrel selection in opening the song. This was followed by the curtain raising upon the minstrelmen who led the audience in singing The Eyes of Texas Are Upon You. So this example and others, which I discuss in an article that I'm going to release tomorrow, show that The Eyes of Texas Are Upon You was sung at minstrel shows at least until 1964 at UT Austin. So we're talking about 6 decades, 61 years of this connection. But let's move on. Here's something else. Let me move that. Here we go. Daily Texan, March 2, 1927. We learned in UT's report that the Eyes of Texas was about accountability, and allegedly that it always has been accountability. What I find looking at the primary sources is something different, very different. Here's an article in the Daily Texan, front page. They're about to celebrate Texas Independence Day, and the writer is reminding the readers that one of the important things that we have is that the Eyes of Texas at UT Austin is sung to commemorate the glorious heroes of Texas history, like our Confederate leaders, General Robert E. Lee, and that is where the phrase comes from. So even though now people don't want to talk about it and people want to act like the song was always about wonderful things and your beloved obligation to the state of Texas to lead a good life and to be accountable to the legislature, this song to people who sang it at UT Austin and in the state of Texas for decades was a song about Southern pride that hankered back to the Eyes of Texas. So the Eyes of Texas wasn't just UT's fight song by the 1920s. That's how they described it. In the football games, it became the fight song. It was inspired by a fight. And it wasn't just a spirit song. The Eyes of Texas was a song about the spirit of General Robert E. Lee. And this is just one example. There are other things like this. Now, I was talking about how the minstrel shows continued. A group eventually took shape known as the Cowboy Minstrels that did multiple performances for decades in all kinds of situations. Here you see them. Here's another image of the Cowboy Minstrels with the guy in the center is playing the official moderator, a central role of the interlocutor. The guy in the center had been president of UT student government, and the stereotypes, the imagery that is being portrayed, we don't need to get into it. Here's more of this, a very tall black woman and the short black man, the black dancers, the angry one, and so on and so forth. These various characters with names like Rastus and Mammy and several others. People laughed, they joked. So I show in the article that I'll release tomorrow, I'll show that this went on peppered with performances of the Eyes of Texas until the 1960s. Eventually, people were annoyed. 1956, Black students begin to be officially integrated into UT Austin. And these Black students who start enrolling as undergraduates at UT Austin in 1956 begin complaining. They don't like the minstrel shows. And they do petitions, they do requests, they voice their concerns in a very tranquil, civilized manner. But the UT administration did not care. The UT administration did not listen to them and did not stop these shows at all. There are interviews of the people who listen to these arguments and say, I don't see what the problem is. I don't see what the problem is. We're not making fun of Black people. We're just people with our, we're just, they give the most bizarre explanations, such as one student writes that in the Daily Texan, that when you go to a show and you see a white student with his face painted black and saying that he's a character called Rastus and acting in whatever bizarre or silly ways, making people laugh, people go home knowing that they laughed at a white man with his face painted black, that it would be silly and unintelligent of us to think that people went home thinking that they laughed at a Black person. That's just not a rational argument. You're not laughing at Black people. We're laughing at a white guy who painted his face black. What are you talking about? We're not making fun of you. I just don't see what the problem is. So for year after year, these people are making this defense. And whenever the Black students say, look, can you please change the song, or at least not wear the blackface? The answer time and again was, I'm sorry, but we already planned the song. We already planned the show for this year. So here in this photograph, this is from 1964, when a student group called Students for a Democratic Society. People who believe in democracy. How about we get some discussion and some different voices here. They organized with Black students and they protested. So the sign says, for example, blackface promotes false racial stereotype. And they do their demonstration. This is in front of the Texas Union, in front of the etching on the wall that says the eyes of Texas are upon you. And it didn't work. It didn't stop them. So the show went on. They protested, and the show was performed again. Here's, I showed you this image. Let me see where I find another one that I want to show you. Here we go. This is from the UT Cactus Yearbook, 1964. This is a show that photograph was protesting. It happened after. So they select Betty Van Wagener, white UT student, as their cowboy minstrel. And then they sing "The Eyes of Texas Are Upon You" to her. Finally, 1965, mid-1965, these people do another show in February, but mid-1965, the Cowboy Minstrels have an internal vote, and public opinion had been growing steadily, so strongly against these performances, which had mostly died in Hollywood. By the 1940s, these things are nearly gone. But here at a place like UT, these things were still being done. So in 1965, the Cowboy Minstrels stopped doing this by their own internal decision. UT administrators never stopped it. In fact, what UT administrators did instead was that in 1967, they prohibited, they removed the Students for a Democratic Society. They removed it from UT's list of approved organizations because these people were generating too many protests, and it was embarrassing. I mean, there's a very comfortable aspect of white privilege which says you can do anything so long as you don't make me feel embarrassed and ashamed, because if I feel ashamed, you're doing that to me. And it's wrong, because I should always feel comfortable. I'm a good person. So if you make me feel ashamed, it's your fault, and your organization is now no longer valid. It's sick, it's sad, but there we are. I think I still didn't mention one aspect of this. So on the one hand, there is the connection to General Lee. Our song is based on fighting words from the Civil War. Spirit and fight song of UT Austin are based on this moment in the Battle of the Wilderness, 1864, in the Civil War. The part of the lyrics, such as "All the Livelong Day," come from the railroad. I've been working on the railroad song, which is about the system of convict leasing, especially of Black men that brutally tortured and abused them. And that is the reason why many people, irrespective of any history of race, they didn't know that there was any connection of the song to anything about racism. They didn't know anything about that, but many people have said time and again, isn't there a connection to slavery? Black athletes saying, I thought this song was about slavery. There's something about it. You cannot escape all the livelong day. There's something that, so what I'm saying, I'm validating that they were right. There is something here that is connected to something that wasn't slavery. It was far worse. It was convict leasing. Now I want to give my thanks to Irene and the Orange Jackets for hosting me today. This group, the Orange Jackets, is part of the very, very large UT movement that so far has sadly been ignored. In 2017, members of the Orange Jackets noticed that some of their fellow members were not singing "The Eyes of Texas" because they used to. This group used to sing "The Eyes of Texas" at meetings. They used to sing "The Eyes of Texas" at UT events. And above all, they are UT's hosts. So they would be on the football field at football games, and they would lead the people in the stands in singing "The Eyes of Texas." 2017, some members of Orange Jackets say don't want to do that, and they explain why. Discussion happened in this group, and they decided we're not going to sing the song anymore in our meetings. That was on November 29, 2017. In 2020, they decided they were not going to sing it anymore at the football game, and here we are. So I'm glad to help in this process of trying to get the university to reconsider using this song. That's about it. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. I know you said I could ask questions in the middle, but you presented so much great information. I was just listening, and I think other people might agree with me. I just learned a lot. So yeah, we have some questions on the form. Before we get into that, I just want to address something that happened during the presentation. So just a quick trigger warning for gun violence. So I don't know if if many people saw, but somebody came into the call and turned the camera on and showed themselves loading a gun. And we removed them as soon as we could. Thank you to Danicia for doing that. But yeah, if you had to see that, I'm very sorry. We had everyone go in the waiting room, but again, like it's hard to tell who's a UT student and who's not, or who's, going to cause harm like that and who's not. So I want to apologize if you had to see that, or even just hearing about it. I feel shaken up. I didn't even see it. But yeah, I want to thank you for coming. And again,
Irene,
yeah, yes.
Irene, this gun incident that you mentioned. Next time, if you ever see something like that, don't just remove it. Take a screenshot of it. But maybe this is being recorded, so maybe you caught it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
We actually got their.
Yeah,
we got their names, so we reported them to Zoom already. Yeah, and we have the recording, so we can double check that as well. But yeah, again, I urge you, if you need to step back, take a break. I urge you to do that, and I encourage you. And I want to go into the question and answer. But yeah, thank you, Dr. Martinez, for all that great information. Thank you all for listening. Again, the QR code, I can put it up again. But yeah, I have a couple questions up already, so let me see. Okay. The first one I have is, so you've done all this great research, and someone wonders, what do you hope to happen next with the research you've done, and how do you think this research could impact the university's decisions, or how can it be linked to action?
The university had claimed that there would be a conversation, and that the conversation would begin with their report. I haven't seen that conversation. What I've seen is the end of the conversation. The moment my article came out, the conversation ended. I've been trying to get faculty council to discuss this issue. So far, I've been unsuccessful. Therefore, some colleagues started a petition. Faculty had never done their own petition to see how many faculty can we actually get on board to suggest that, to argue that this should not be UT sung. And the reason is not to disrespect the people who love it. I know there are countless thousands of people who think that the song does mean, and always should mean, only what it means to them. They sang it with their dad when they were a little boy, and they sang it at the football field, and what it was about school pride, honor, being a good person, etc. So there are these people who, so I don't want to make them unhappy or sad, but I believe in freedom of speech. So if someone wants to sing a song, I think they should be welcome to sing whatever song they want every day, wherever they want. So my issue is just whether this should be the official song of UT. And my answer is it shouldn't be, very clearly. Why? Because it's not a unifying song. It's very clear. It's not a unifying song. And to give you an example, something I didn't say about in my talk at all, which is what I just looked at some of the history. What has actually happened at UT because of the song? Well, not only did the Orange Jackets, which is an honorary distinguished service organization, stop singing it. Not only did the Orange Jackets stop singing it, but 132 presidents of student organizations have signed the petition that this should not be UT sung. 132. The Black Presidents Leadership Alliance, which represents 49 groups of African-American students, Black students on campus, have also formally petitioned that this should not be UT sung. The leaders of student government, the executive committee of student government, the Senate of College Councils, members of both bodies have signed petitions requesting that this not be UT sung. The Texas Legislative Caucus, the 13 elected African Americans representatives at the Capitol have said that they are unequivocally against this being UT school song. The president of the Austin NAACP has said this should not be the school song. The president of the Houston NAACP, the president of the Texas NAACP. How many more people? And why are they all ignored? Why are we all ignored? Because there is no democracy at this university. There's no democracy. So there has been no opportunity for people to discuss this publicly, for people to debate this, there's been the decision was made by our president, President Jay Hartzell, decided by himself, that this is the song of the university. He decided before the history was researched, he decided it before my research, and now all we have to do is restore somehow some semblance of rationality to this process, because this is not the first time. This is not the first time the university has not listened to the students. The Black athletes are leaders, our athlete leaders, football players, boldly came out against this in June of 2020. And, you know, scores of news articles and commentary, they were threatened because of this. It's absurd to have a school song that should unify people and instead leads Black athletes to be threatened. This is absurd. There is no song in the entire spectrum of universities and colleges in all of the United States that is as controversial as this one. And to give you just one more example, just so you see the extent of the absurdity of this. The University of Mississippi had a fight song, which is known as Dixie. I wish I was in Dixie. And that song was created in the 1850s to be performed, get ready, at a minstrel show. Dixie was a song written in 1859 for a minstrel show. And that was the spirit fighting song in football games at the University of Mississippi. You know what Ole Miss did? 2016, they got rid of it. Ole Miss got rid of, and you know what they said? These very reasonable, rational, admirable administrators finally belatedly said, we have a new thing going on here at Mississippi. We're trying to be inclusive. We're trying to make sure that we remove the symbols of the Confederacy. The song was sang, Dixie was sang when the president of the Confederacy was appointed. So they had a history, they confronted it, and they got rid of it. Was the University of Mississippi burned down? No, it's a song. It's a song. If people want to sing it, they can play it, they can do gatherings, and they can enjoy it. And they can choose not to read anything. And as always, shut their eyes to what Black people are telling them. They can choose to do that and be very happy with their song. But at the same time, it doesn't need to be the official song of the university. I told President Hartzell, I think it was just last week, that I'm at peace at this because I think the song will be changed and I think he will change it. He just doesn't know it yet. Because again, what is it? People haven't looked at the evidence at length. Once the evidence is more clearly out, a survey was done, for example, last year, asking people, do you know the racist origins of the song, The Eyes of Texas? This survey was done by a former UT football player, former NFL player, Rod Babers. Do you know the racist origins? 92% of the people who replied his survey, maybe it was 1,700 people or 1,600 people, they said no, they knew nothing about it. So once people find out, you know, I think we can make progress on this area and people can get over their hard-headed, obstinate, close-minded, angry reaction when a person of color tells them, look, I think this is just kind of hurtful. How many connections to ugly things do you want? And unfortunately, this song has too many.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. Another question we have, I guess, kind of going off of what you just answered, the fact that UT's history and UT's racist history isn't transparent enough, the fact that people don't know enough about it, do you have any thoughts on what ways students, prospective students can learn those things? Like, where do we go to find out these things? Because you've given us so much great information. How do we move towards having more transparency of our history, or do you have any ideas about that?
The system says my connection is unstable, so some of your question was garbled, but I did hear you say, how do we move towards having more transparency? Good question. I really think our university has to explore creating democracy where it doesn't exist. How can we create a democratic system? Because, for example, one of the most mature comments I've seen is from a millionaire, Robert Reeves, who wrote a letter to President Hartzell saying, don't worry about any angry donors who might pull funding. If they pull funding, I'll cover it and I'll help with the fundraising, the guy says. Now, this guy wrote an article in which he explains his position in detail, and he says he loved the Eyes of Texas. He studied at UT, bachelor's degree, a master's degree. He became very successful. This is Robert Reeves, the chief technology officer of, I think it's called Liquid Base. I'm trying to let someone into the Zoom. So what I'm saying is that he explains that even though he loves the song, he sang it to his baby boy as a lullaby. They sang it at football players. This is the key point that he says, it's not his university anymore. This is your university. He says the university should belong to the students now. And if the students don't want to sing this song, let them create a new tradition. I mean, how absurd is it that we have a marching band? I haven't gone into my article, just so you know, the article I'm publishing tomorrow is titled 100 Problems with the Eyes of Texas. And I literally enumerate 100. So one of them, the marching band, many members, they did a survey last fall to see how many people were comfortable playing this song. And the results were roughly an even split. Apparently, half of the band members didn't want to play the song. So they said, we don't have enough instrumentation. We can't even execute the song. How absurd it is to have a college song. And then naturally the administration came out and said, well, you know, we never really wanted that. We just wanted to play it over the loudspeaker. But that's not what the band members experienced. What the band members experienced is that, you know, they were preparing to see when are we going to play, and suddenly they didn't have. So now students in the band are being told as of last week that you're gonna play the song. In other words, all UT students have a new right. It's a new right that was coined in 2020. And the right is you don't have to sing the song. But if you're in the band, you are going to play the song. And if you're not, we're gonna remove you. Can you believe the absurdity? If you believe this is a racist song and you don't want to play it, we will remove you from the band. But we're so nice, we're going to create a separate band with some of the equal rights, separate but equal. We're going to create. This is an embarrassment. This is an unthinkable. This would have never happened if we had some sort of a democracy or some sort of a consultative process. This would have been inconceivable. But here we are. You know, if anyone is, I see some band members in the thing. If anybody wants to comment and add to this, it's sad, but it's also absurd. And because of the absurdity, I think it's unsustainable. So, you know, bear in mind, I want to say something very clearly. We don't need a majority. We are not going to try to get a majority. And even without a majority, we are going to change the song. You watch. We're going to change it just because it's all absurd. And there's a limit to how much negative press a university, an institution can receive over something. At some point, they'll realize, you know what, maybe it's time we move along, and they'll have their corporate way of talking to smooth it over and to try to get us to look at something else. But I'm really glad to help and to support the students who for years have been complaining. I mean, football players have been complaining about this for many years. And of course, people want to say, no, it's all invented. It's liberals trying to divide us. It's all about George Floyd. All of that is fiction. It's a real problem. It's not an invention. It's a real problem. And the more people retrench, the worse the situation gets. And we'll make progress. We have a hand raised by Maria. Maria, can you please speak up? If anybody, let's see if anybody.
Hi, Professor Martinez. we've had conversations before about this, but I'm a member of the Longhorn Band. I'm a rising senior. I guess before I even get started, I want to thank the Orange Jackets for hosting this meeting tonight. I think it's a really important cause, and I think the accountability that you've taken is just astounding in comparison to the lack of accountability from the Longhorn Band. So thank you for that primarily. And then as a secondary point, I'm a rising senior, and we were told if you don't feel comfortable playing this song, we suggest membership in an alternative ensemble. Then, like, you just shouldn't be part of, you shouldn't be part of this group. That wasn't the language that they used, but yeah, it makes me really sad that I'm not going to get to have a senior marching season. I'm sorry? What did you say?
Oh, I said they use a synonym for that.
Yeah.
So instead of saying the
exactly.
sentence that they mean, which is the true sentence, if people just learn to say the truth, the truth is, we hereby order you to play the song, and if you do not play it, you will be removed from this band. That's the truth.
Yep.
And well, we'll create a band. It'll have some other name. It'll have some other name. So you'll be fine in a separate band. And we hope not all the Black students will leave, although the Black students have said categorically that they're not going to sing the song. We hope they don't. We're offering them some money. Hopefully they won't, because we're trying to find some. It's an absurdity. It's an offensive absurdity. I mean, to have leaders of the NAACP saying that it's humiliating. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that it's a
Maria,
bribe.
and you were cutting.
Uh-oh, give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry about that. Yeah, like it feels like hush money that we've been told if we're part of different ensembles like the Longhorn Band, the Longhorn Pep Band, Mariachi, we can claim $3,000 in scholarships. But for me, I've had issues with the way that the Longhorn Band sends out its scholarships, to the point that when I received a Longhorn Band scholarship, I had to pay $800 to the financial aid office for that. I was vetted for a $2,500 scholarship. I had to turn it down because I couldn't afford it because of my loans. So I can't be part of the band because of the financial aid they're going to give us. My partner's in the band right now. He's graduating this next year. He's a year older than I am, so he's not going to be in the band next year either. And I don't see much reason to stay when the organization itself has said, if you don't feel comfortable playing this song, we suggest membership in an alternative ensemble. And I asked that question about the Longhorn Band in the form that was sent out. So I'm glad that got addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you for pushing back to any extent you have and your band members, because everyone is afraid. I mean, isn't it absurd? We are at the greatest public university in the state, and faculty is afraid to say what they think. Students are afraid. Millionaires, white millionaire men threaten football athletes. We have multiple football players who spoke to the Texas Tribune and other newspapers saying we were threatened by donors that we would never get a job in the state of Texas if we don't stand during the song. It's just an absurdity. And these are people who are already exploited. I mean, all the live long day, who works all the live long day? UT athletes. They sign a contract. They have to sign this claim that they've worked a limited number of hours, but then they train more than those hours. It's an absurdity. Sonia?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your detailed research and for speaking out. I'm a faculty member in the Butler School of Music. I just wanted to acknowledge that I have colleagues who also are opposed to the Eyes of Texas and its use. We are very, very concerned about our disenfranchised colleagues as well as students of color who are being caught in this. And so I just wanted to amplify those concerns.
Sonia, at least
yeah.
to my ear, you're cutting out a bit. What did you say after we are very concerned?
There are faculty in the School of Music who are very, very concerned and stand with the students, with the members of the Longhorn Band who have been disenfranchised by this process. So I guess what I'm saying is it's important to find out which faculty as well are standing alongside Professor Carson and I are teaching a course on the Eyes of Texas where we're dealing with these issues. And I wanted to note some other parallels. So I think it's really telling that Professor Martinez has this picture right now, even though officially the prison lease system ended officially in the early part of the 20th century. Actually, practices have continued in Texas, particularly in Huntsville, and in the entertainment world with the Huntsville Rodeo, which forced prisoners to participate as musicians, but also as rodeo riders at great personal harm. And so in a sense, we could think about the ways in which music here is being harnessed as a political weapon, while the fact that music does have political power is being denied by those in power. And one of the other points I just wanted to add, one of the concerns that I have is that for the committee that did the Eyes of Texas report, there were no members of music faculty who are trained in musical analysis, in music historiography, in ethnomusicology, to actually provide deeper understanding of the power of sound and music to inculcate violence and violence against others. And just to elaborate a little bit, maybe a little known fact, the second melody in The Eyes of Texas is actually taken from Someone's in the Kitchen with Dinah, which is another minstrel song. Dinah being the minstrel show label for a putative, very loose, licentious Black woman. And so this melody actually works at multiple levels, not only a levy song, but also playing on stereotypical or racist ideas about gendered Black bodies. So I just wanted to add that, and thank you. And thank you to the Orange Jackets for doing this.
Thank you so much, Sonia. And what you say, I've heard several professors tell me that they were surprised and couldn't understand how this committee didn't have an ethnomusicologist. One was invited, right, to talk for a little bit when it was pointed out. We say, how can you not have someone who specializes in this? And we have people, no doubt about it. We have qualified people.
Yeah, thank you so much. Several people, I think we're gonna take a couple more questions, 2 more maybe. Is that okay with you, Dr. Martinez?
You're cutting out.
Oh, sorry. Are you okay with us taking 1 or 2 more questions? Dr. Martinez, do you have the time for that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, sounds good. And just to let y'all know, we, just for these last few minutes, we won't be letting any more people in from the waiting room. This is being recorded and will be available at some point. So just so you know. So several questions pretty much asked, what can we as students do at this point when it seems like we keep getting shot down by the university, and how do we leverage our voices, and what do we do? Do we just, it seems like we're just waiting at this point. So how do we leverage our voices and our number to either start a new tradition on our own or get the administration to hear us? I don't know. What can we do as students?
I think starting a new tradition on your own is a great idea. All student movements from the ground up are the ones that have true spirit. Anything that has to be imposed on people is shameful, sad, and frankly pathetic. So it would be silly of us to wait for white rich men to give us the permission to write a new song. So I encourage UT students to get together, create their own groups and committees, have them be open. Anybody who wants to join can come in, invent multiple songs. That's how the Eyes of Texas came to be. The Eyes of Texas is the student song, that was not expected to become this important, impressive thing. History is not just something that we read about. It's something that we can make. You can make history, and it's a great opportunity. I also think you should stand by your principles. If somebody doesn't want to sing or play the song or stand for a song, then just don't do it. And as I mentioned from this one survey by sports commentator Rod Babers, so few people know about this. As more people know about it, they say, you know what, I'm done. I love the song. It meant a lot to me, but at the same time, we can sing something else. There are many great songs. So I think that the tide will turn. I don't think, I don't know. It'll be, you'll see what I wrote. It'll come out tomorrow. And, it could be that at some point it will be appropriate to do a protest. But again, that's up to the student body, and I'd be happy to support. It's hopefully many of you have ideas about what can be done. Anything from posting, making memes, posting things on social media, talking to people, writing emails to professors. There's now a petition of professors. Write an email to your professor telling, please sign this. Maybe I can send you the link to Irene and she can distribute it. But professors are shy people generally who are, hesitant to step out and support anything. So it's sometimes, sadly, tenure is not appreciated. People don't realize you have certain immunity to say some things. You should say them. You should say them. That's why you have it. That's, it's like one of these workers' rights that so many people don't have. Staff don't have it. People who work with the president don't have it. Many people who work with the president do want the song to be different. Can they say it? No, of course not. So people who are deans, department chairs, they have no freedom. But other people do. I have freedom, and I like that. And students have freedom, and we should all use it. And let me say something. I think it is shameful and sad how UT has managed to silence our student athletes. Our student athletes were doing great. They were doing great leading this in 2020 and getting things like renaming of a field and statues and scholarships. They were doing great. But it's sad that by the time, get this, by the time the Eyes of Texas official committee report came out in March, newspapers contacted our Black athletes and there was no reply. Can you believe that? People who were tweeting and were outspoken are like, well, I've got to watch after been threatened that I'm not going to get a job. I want to get a career in sports, etc. It's really sad that that people finally get the strength and courage to speak up about something that they've been complaining of for many years. I mean, we have famous former football players saying, yeah, when I played football 10, 20 years ago, this was a problem. Tweeting and explaining about it. We have people saying that. And finally, when this group of young men, including DeMarvion Overshone and Brennan Eagles and multiple of these individuals, they come out and they speak up. It lasts a little bit amount of time because it's not treated with the proper respect. It's really sad. It's a mistake. It's a mistake. Our administrators, our president, Jay Hartzell, is making a series of unnecessary and hurtful mistakes. He can fix them any day, any single day, simply by deciding. He can decide, okay, fine, let's try something else. So it's really up to him. At some point, I think he will do it. And if he doesn't, the problem will get uglier for him. And it eventually becomes Jay's problem. Eventually it becomes Jay's song. Does he really want that? I don't know why he would. Wow.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dr. Martinez, for speaking to us today. And thank you for everyone who joined us, asked questions, listened. Like Dr. Martinez shared, there's power in us is knowing this information, even when this information has been kept quiet, when so many of our fellow students have been silenced from speaking out. Just knowing this, sharing this information is a good start. I look forward to reading your article when it comes out tomorrow. Like you said, contacting professors, and we'll make sure to distribute that petition link when we upload on Facebook. The recording for this event should also be uploaded on Facebook as soon as I can get to it. Other than that, do you have any kind of final words, Dr. Martinez, before we wrap up?
thank you all so much. And I also want to say that if anybody wants to email or write me about this or talk to me about this, I'll be happy to. Al Martinez at austin.utexas.edu. And I've learned a lot from the students. Frankly, I did not have this strong position a year ago or 2 years ago, even though I had endorsed the student petition, because I thought, you know, this sounds fine. Let's discuss this. Let's see what happens. But I've learned a lot, and I'm glad to be a part of this and to be a part of UT.